The question is that the bill be now read a second time. Call on the member for Hughes.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise to speak on the National Disability Insurance Scheme Bill of 2012. And Deputy Speaker, I do so as someone with a personal and vested interest. For 16 years and 11 months ago, my son Trent was born with Down syndrome. And the day he was diagnosed was perhaps the hardest day of my life. Deputy Speaker, words cannot explain the grief one suffers when they discover all the hopes and dreams that they have for their child are dashed and they are born with a disability for their life. It leaves one with a great sense of guilt. But it's the uncertainty, the financial uncertainty, knowing that it's a lifelong condition for which there is no cure. And I remember, Deputy Speaker, leaving the hospital and thinking of the inequities that a child that is born with a disability is often treated differently by our government and given different financial resources as if they acquired that disability through an injury or through a motor vehicle accident. And further, Deputy Speaker, autism is another disability that affects up to 1 in 100 Australians. But as well as having Down syndrome, my son is also one of those 1 in 100 that suffers from autism. And like many parents that have their children diagnosed with autism, it took a while for Trent to be correctly diagnosed. When he was about 18 months old, we had concerns that he had problems with his hearing because he wasn't responding to noises that we would expect of a normal child. So for month after month, we took him along to a hearing clinic where they would put him in a darkened room and make a noise with a puppet in one corner, expecting him to turn so we knew that his hearing was okay. But of course Trent would pay no attention, and the hearing specialist thought that he had significant problems with his hearing. So we went for months and months trying to fit him with a hearing aid. And the very minute that we would put a hearing aid into his ear, he would pull it out. It was a game that we would play for hours and hours on end, but he would always win. However, one day we were at my mother-in-law's place and he was watching his favourite TV show, Blue's Clues, which was over on in the corner of the room. And the very minute he heard the sound that he knew and recognised, he turned his face towards it. And I thought, you little bugger, you've been conning us all the time. His hearing was okay, but he was autistic, and that provided many of its own unique challenges. With both autism and Down syndrome, Trent does not have any language, he can't dress himself or toilet himself. He has repetitive habits, and he will be needed cared for all his life, his entire life, by my wife and myself. And now that he's reached the age of 16, it's time for him to start shaving. So once a week, I go through a procedure where we basically play jiu-jitsu. I try to get the razor to his face, and he pushes it away time and time and time again. So now, at least he's gotten used to a little bit. So shaving's down to about 40 minutes from the original hour and a half. And that is something I'll have to do with my son for the rest of his life. But Trent certainly knows what he wants. He's a happy kid. He laughs as much as any other kid. He is satisfied and comfortable in the world that he lives in and that we have created for him. He certainly gets frustrated from time to time, and he can often get past that frustration with about 30 minutes of hard work. He does not have to worry about what's happening next day, next week or next year. His world is uncluttered with worries or responsibilities or social acceptance and the subconscious fears that plague the rest of us. But most of all, Deputy Speaker, having a son like Trent has made me realise that every life is important, it's precious and it's valuable. However, caring for Trent is a lifetime's task. There are simply no days off. And of course, Speaker, our greatest worry, something we try and put out of our mind, is what will happen to our son when we are too old to care for him or when we are gone. There is also the financial concern. The Autism Society of America estimates that the lifelong cost of caring for a child with autism is between $3.5 and $5 million. But all the money in the world does not make dealing with autism or Down syndrome easier. And many parents I know that have children with severe disabilities are on medication for depression. The studies have shown that single mums looking after kids with autism have the same stress levels as soldiers in combat. And then, of course, there's the strain on the family. With divorce rates with parents caring for disabled children are high, almost twice the high as the national average. For Deputy Speaker, although no amount of money will heal disabilities such as Down syndrome or autism, money and resources can improve the quality of life. It can provide greater opportunities, and it can help take the stress off families. In my maiden speech in this House, I talked about the unsung group of heroes working across Australia that we may well call our neglected people, our carers and our children with disabilities. And I noted that as a society, we are asking our carers to provide over $1 billion, 1 billion hours worth of unpaid work a year, which if we as taxpayers had to pick up the tab, would cost us over $30 billion. Simply, as a society, we are asking our carers to do too much, to do more than their fair share of the heavy lifting. And also pledged, Deputy Speaker, that during my time in Parliament, I'll be fighting to ensure that our carers and our children with special needs will be provided with the resources that they rightly deserve and need. So, Deputy Speaker, I, for one, am pleased that we are moving to improve the lot for people with disabilities and their carers. But let's not gild the lily. Let's not mislead the public and the carers and people with disabilities about what this bill actually does. The Productivity Commission's report called for these trials to be funded with $3.9 billion over the forward estimates. But this Parliament has only kicked in $250 million a year, 4 years for the trials. That's just 25% of what the Productivity Commission called for. So before the NDS has even started, this Parliament has shortchanged Australia's disabled 75% of the funds that they needed for the trials. And yet, Speaker, Deputy Speaker, we seem to be able to find money for almost everything else. And we haven't even got a clue about how we're going to fund the rollout of the NDS in full when it costs $8 billion a year. So any member of this Parliament that walks around and claims to have delivered a national disability insurance scheme, when the truth is these trials are short-funded by 75%, they are simply hoodwinking the public. And they are involved in a cruel hoax on our nation's disabled and carers. Deputy Speaker, no one can say they have delivered the NDIS until they have actually delivered the funding needed, and they have delivered it on a sustainable basis, and that is what this debate should all be about. Now, Deputy Speaker, there is not a split match between members on either side of this House as it comes to our desire to deliver an NDIS and to deliver for our carers and kids with disabilities better services. However, Speaker, I have great concerns that the government is playing politics with the NDIS. We've had the Community Service Minister shrieking across the chamber here, "We own the NDIS." Deputy Speaker, no one owns the NDIS. And when it is finally delivered, which may be in 7 years' time, it will be owned by the people of Australia. What the public wants to see, Deputy Speaker, is this issue tackled in bipartisan spirit, with every member of the House working together to deliver an NDIS. For Deputy Speaker, we know, according to the Productivity Commission's report, that to deliver this in full could take 7 years, spanning the lives of 3 parliaments. So to do that over 3 parliaments, we need stability. We need to have a bipartisan approach through those next 3 parliaments over those next 7 years. And to address that issue and that problem, my good friend, the member for Dawson, someone who understands disabilities from his own life experiences, thoughtfully put together a motion to establish a joint select committee on the National Disability Insurance Scheme, which would have overseen the implementation of the NDIS. It would have been subject to a terms of reference and agreed upon by both the Prime Minister and the opposition leader and ratified by the entire House. It would have comprised of 4 government members, 4 senators, 4 opposition members and 1 Greens member and 1 member of the non-aligned, either a senator or a member of the House of Reps. It would have been jointly chaired by a government member and an opposition member. And mostly important, this committee would have remained in existence until the full implementation of the NDIS is achieved. Now, if members of this current parliament were truly concerned about the welfare and opportunities of our disabled, rather than playing politics, they should have supported that motion. But instead, it was completely rejected. Such conduct raises further concerns about whether this government is really truly concerned about a better deal for our disabled, or whether they're just here to play politics with the most vulnerable members of our society. So I call on the government to rethink their negativity, to rethink their opposition to this bipartisan approach, and create an opportunity where both sides can go ahead on a bipartisan approach. Now, Speaker, going forward, to deliver the NDIS over 3 parliaments, 7 years, there are a few very important things that we need to get right. Firstly, we need to be very careful that any funding we put forward goes to provide resources to those who need them the most, and it's not captured by the bureaucracies and is not wasteless on needless administration. And most importantly, we need to work out how we're going to fund the NDIS on a long-term sustainable basis. For we can have all the goodwill in the world, we can tour the countryside talking up the NDIS and print glossy brochures to stick up in our windows and hand out around our electorates. We can take the applause from disabled groups. We can design the most effective and the most efficient scheme to provide those services. But unless we show how the NDIS will be paid for on a sustainable basis, the NDIS will remain nothing but a mirage. And as I said, Speaker, the funding must be on a sustainable basis. It cannot be funded by deficit spending. This is the reason why, Speaker, there are only 2 ways that we can fund the NDIS. The first is we must cut the waste. We must eliminate every indulgent and feel-good schemes. Perhaps, Speaker, we should set up a museum of government waste here and put all the long list of wasteful schemes we have seen from this government so that every single parliamentarian walks past them every day and does not repeat those mistakes. And we must end the palpable waste that I've seen in this place, which has made me sick to the stomach since I've been here. We need to develop a culture of thrift across the bureaucracies. And when one reads in today's papers that senior Climate Change Authority executives have been dining out at posh Italian restaurants and leaving the taxpayers to pick up almost a $2,000 bill, we need to take to this culture of indulgence with a meat axe. But most importantly, if we deliver the NDIS, we're only going to achieve this by making sure our economy is running on all cylinders and by lifting our productivity. We cannot do this by introducing new taxes and red tape that raise the cost of doing business in Australia and make Australian industry uncompetitive. For ultimately, to deliver the NDIS, the only way we can do so is it will become a social dividend of a productive economy running on full steam. But look at some of the policies this government has promoted which jeopardise our ability. On the government's own figures, the carbon tax will reduce Australia's GDP by a cumulative total of $1 trillion by 2050. $1 trillion reduction in GDP. That's the greatest threat we have to delivering the NDIS. But we need policy, Speaker. We need policies to deliver this NDIS, policies that foster individual economic opportunity. We need policies that promote free markets and protect them with effective competition laws. And we need policies that we can see the economy grow, for that is the only way that we can deliver the NDS and provide it on a sustainable basis.